Okay, now let's add some materials without any complications. Let's do some simple materials here. We're going to double click to make a new material. You can also click create, new material. You'll notice that my material is purely white and there's no specular here. By default the material is a bit gray and has a specular channel, but I don't like that, so I just made a white one. Turned off specular, put this to 100% and went edit. Not attributes, went edit and set as default, just like I did with the cylinder and the sphere. Just these defaults make more sense to me. So also as near as here, my color thing, yours might be slightly different. Yours might look like this. I don't like the red, green, blue, not very intuitive. I much prefer to have a hue saturation value, so you pick the tint of the color and then you just drag this for saturation and the darkness. Once again, wrong channel, sorry, specular. Now, so in the color, I want to get a nice brown color here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's drag this on top of the catapult. Now we're going to want a gray material for the rock, so let's control click and drag it here, and let's make it gray, kill the saturation, make it like a dark gray, maybe add a bit of blue to it. Let's put it on the rock, control click and drag, kill the saturation, make it a bit lighter gray for the ring. Let's control click out brown material, make a lighter brown material. Let's just pull it out a bit, make it a bit less saturated, and let's apply it to the wheels. Also here, let's copy and paste this, Control C, Control V. Let's drag this thing in a bit, let's pull it out, add and apply this material to it. Lovely. Okay, our catapult is starting to look like a catapult with some color to it. Let's throw in a plane. Make it nice and big. Let's go to this setting here and add collider body. And let's press play. Okay, as you can see, the rock is sliding along the plane, which is very unrealistic. For some reason, Cinema 4D for defaults has very low friction on their materials. Don't know why, but it does. So what you do is you just, let's control click on all these dynamics tags. Go to our attributes, go to collision, and change our friction to like 90%. And bounce maybe to like 10%. We don't need things bouncing right now. And now when we press play again, it launches the boulder and it actually rolls. See? Much nicer. By the way, I press F8 to play and stop the animation, in case you're wondering how I press play without seeing this button here. Yeah, you can also press that. So yeah, there it is. Let's add just a little bit more here. I want to add, I don't like this all brown in my original catapult. There's another little place here. Let's grab this thing. By the way, if you notice, if you just click on something, it'll select the whole top object, so it'll select the whole symmetry pillars. But if you click on it again, like if you double click on it, but not like Windows double click, like a slow double click, you'll first select the whole object and then you'll select the objects underneath. So in this case, select the center pillar. So what I want to do is I want to control click and drag this, so we have two of them. Then I want to press our Alt T key for our transform plugin, and I want to drag, and scale, and I want to scale this guy down. And then I want to go to our regular scale tool, so here, and I want to just drag this guy out a bit. And then I want my materials, I want to apply this material to it. There you go, just adding a bit of, so there's a bit more of that lighter brown color in there. Also, I don't like this thing. I want it to be darker. So let's, by the way, when you notice, if you select an object, like if you don't have anything selected, for example this object, you can see the material that's applied to it will be highlighted with this little yellow square in your material manager. Very handy for quickly finding materials. Or of course, once you select an object here, like say you have everything folded up, you can always press, if you go to Shift C or Shift F12 to the command manager and type in scroll to first active, you can click that and it'll open it up, and then you can double click on your material tag and it'll open the right material. I have the scroll to first active mapped to ~1, so that's how I get around. So I just go this thing and I go ~1, oops, ~1, damn it, ~1, and it scrolls down to it, and we have the material here. So I want to make it a bit darker. It's too bright. I think I want, and the rock material, where's the rock material? I want this guy to be a bit lighter. Yeah, that looks, I don't like this blue. Let's kill it. There we go. Okay. Now let's also, while we're working on the catapult, let's add a bit of detail to it. Maybe also make this brown material a bit more burnt brown. Feels too much like it. Yeah, about that seems good. Okay. So let's add also, when the wheels will spin, we're going to want to see some crosses on them. So let's add, I'll just copy the cylinder. Where's that wheel? Let's just working on this side. So let's just control drag this cylinder here. Let's move it out. Rotate it 90 degrees, holding the shift key to snap it. Let's find our little green dots here. Let's scale them down and apply the brown material to it and delete this one. You can see the tags there. And now let's just move this guy in so he's about halfway in. And once again, control click and drag him. Rotate him another 90 degrees. Maybe make this radius a bit smaller so one's kind of inside the other. This guy's radius is a bit too big as well, so let's drag him down a bit. And yeah, I'll leave this one as it is. That looks about right. Let's go to display, wireframes. Yeah, that seems about right. Okay. Now we will make the ground plane and some background trees. As you saw in the original file, it was kind of like a 2D platform kind of thing. So let's do that. Let's delete this plane. Let us make a nice little cube. And let us move it to -100. That way it'll be flat with the wheels. And let us make it bigger. Oops. And then let's also scale it out this way. Let's go to our Alt-T transform tool and pull it all the way out. Whoa, that's a bit too far. Move back in. Well, this distance is good. So let's get back to materials. Let's name these quickly. Let's go, this is wood light. This is wood dark. This is gonna be our metal, or is that a rock? Let's zoom in and check. Which one's the lighter one? The lighter is the rock. Okay, so this is our rock, and this is our metal. Okay, so let's make a new material. Double click. Remember that my default material is just white. There is no specular in it. Let's now make it green. Once again, if you didn't watch the beginning of this tutorial, you can switch the versions of these sliders here by clicking this little arrow. So let's make it green, give it a bit more yellow, a bit darker, and let's call it grass. By the way, I double click on the material to bring this up. If you have more screen space and you have the attributes window separate from the material, not on one tab, then when you just, like, if you have your materials as default, if they're down here, if you click on stuff, your attributes tab will automatically switch to them so you can view them. Just as I'm recording, it's a relatively small space here. That's why my interface is slightly reorganized. Okay, so let's apply the nice green material to the grass. Let's call this land, or call it grass, I guess. Now also let's pull this grass up a bit while still in the transform tool. Let's move it up, it's too big. Now let's control drag this to make the underground and make a new material called ground, and let's make it brown. Pretty close enough. A bit darker. Let's call it underground and delete this green tag. But now we need to go to the move tool and move this guy down a bit, and then maybe go back to our transform tool and let's scale this guy in a bit, and then let's grab the bottom square and drag it down, and just here to prevent intersections, pull it in as well. Okay, good. So let's add the trees. And the reason I'm building this now is because I want to get a feel for the environment and what it feels like while I'm, when I get to the castle bit. I like to build things in a way that lets me work it like on a canvas, like if I'm painting, and I, as I make it, I can change and adjust. Yeah. I prefer, like some people, if obviously you have a job, everything's planned out, but if you're just doing animations for yourself, I prefer this way where I block things in and then I add details, and it's easier to adjust this way. So let's make our tree. Our tree is going to be pretty simple. Actually, let's make it, when you make stuff, it's always a good idea to just make a new file. It's just easier since you don't have to work or worry with all the other stuff. Let's make a cylinder. As you remember, my cylinder by default only has 12 rotation segments. And for this tree, I think even that is too much. Let's make it 8. Seems pretty good. Let's scale this thing down. Let's make it editable. Get these points that we have up here. Once again, editable is the C key here, or pressing here. My rectangular selection tool, you can find it in here, or you can use your forward mouse button. Click and drag, that's what I do. Make sure also when you do that, is that your rectangular selection tool is set to only select visible elements. To not select. And how you do this is you make a new file, like an empty file, and you go to this tool and you change it, and then you change it back to live selection. Also, while you're at it, if you have like let's say you made this file, I'll show you how to quickly make a new default file. Now, when you go to the knife tool, if you right click and go knife, you will notice that mine is already in loop mode here. Yours is probably in line mode. Whenever I use a knife tool, I always use it in loop mode. I don't use it, I rarely use it in line mode. So loop mode is very useful. So what you do now is you've set it to loop mode. And now you can, I'll show you this. You can go, you save this file as a new .c4d, a file called new.c4d, in your Cinema 4D folder where your Cinema 4D exe is. And then every time you make a new file by pressing Ctrl N or pressing new, you will open that file. So if you have a cylinder in it, every time you open a new file, there will be a cylinder. If you add some materials to it, every time you open a new file, there will be materials in it. But for me, I just use it to set the tools the way I like them. So every time I open a new file, for me specifically, the important bit is the rectangular selection is set to not to only select visible, and my knife tool is set to knife. And also in my render settings, these things also save. I set my default size to 1824 by 576. I have my anti-aliasing on best. That's pretty much it. Yeah, just like small things like this. Oh yeah, I changed my frame rate to 25. And usually I change my frame, and I changed my default project size to 125 frames instead of the regular 3 seconds. So yeah, these are simple things that just, speed up your workflow. So back to the tree, we've selected the points at the top. Let's go to our scale tool. Let's scale them down. Maybe move them down a bit. Okay. Now let's copy and paste this. Just control click and drag them up. Control drag and click them up again. Okay. So now let's use the MoGraph. Let's use the cloner for now. Let's clone him up. Once again, my default cloner these are set to 0. So when I make a cloner, nothing really appears, and then I just select which one I want to drag up. So this seems pretty solid. Now let's make a taper. Yeah, a taper deformer by holding the Shift key, and then it should be sized. Yep. It'll be under your cloner, but then you just pull it out, select both of them, and press Alt-G. If you don't have R15, you will have to change the size of this thing to match the cloner manually. But generally it's just a matter of getting these coordinates, 100, 179, 100, and pasting them into these 3 fields. Now that we have these guys in one null, we can now grab the taper object, and we can adjust its tapering. For some reason, taper object. Where is the little dot? Oh, there it is. It was hiding behind the arrow. So there we go, and we can taper it down to make the shape of a Christmas tree. This Christmas tree needs to firstly taper here. Let's turn off curvature to 0%, so it's a straight down taper. And I think we don't have enough sections here, so let's increase this count to 4. As you can see, the top one is kind of high up. So we grab our little cylinder, let's press our Alt-T, let's scale it down, and let's reduce the distance of the cloner. There we go. Much better. We don't really need this anymore, so we can just right click and go current state to object and press delete. And now we just have our 4 cylinders here. Let's drag them out, delete these nulls, and we can just adjust them in the point mode. So for example, all of these guys seem like they really, let's go to our top view, or where do we get them? Yeah, here we go. Hold the Shift key to add to selection. Shift key to add to selection. Be careful not to select the bottom polygons. And let's go to our scale tool and scale them out by clicking this green triangle here. There you go, so they're a bit wider. Okay, that looks a bit better. Let's get our top triangle, let's move it down a bit. And we have our Christmas tree. Lovely. Last one, let's copy this guy down and call this trunk. Object tool, move it down just a bit. Now go to point mode, select these bottom points, scale them down, move them up, scale them down. By the way, once again, I switch between the move tool with my W and R keys, but yours might be your E and R keys. They're just the keys under your numbers. And there we have it. We have a trunk. That's pretty much it for our low poly tree. So let's Alt-G this thing. Let's move our axis to with the move tool. Let's move it down to the bottom. So that's about right. Yeah, okay, good. We'll need this when we make a cloner object, because that's where the cloner will be placed. So when we scale things, they scale from the right position. So let's make some materials in it while we're here. Let's make this tree trunk. Oops. Trunk. And make it brown. Apply it to the null object here. Let's make, let's apply it to the trunk object here. Let's make another object, double click on it, make it green, a bit less saturated, a bit more towards the darker, there we go. And call this tree fir. I think that's what it's called, I don't know, it's pine needles. And just apply it to the null object. And call this tree. Okay, now Control C, Window, Catapult, and Control V, and Move Tool, and we can move this guy over here. Okay, so he's a bit small and underground, so let's move him up. Let's move them over here. Let's scale them up. Also scaling, when we move the axis, now when we scale it without having to readjust its position. So that's kind of handy too. That seems about right. Okay, now holding the Alt key, MoGraph, Cloner, and Attributes, and Z coordinate. I can tell it's Z by this little blue handle here. So, nope, minus. About here. And number. There we go. That's the correct number, I think. Let's add another one. And there we have it. We have our trees. Now, as you can see right now, the trees are all kind of regular. And maybe I want to move this just a bit up. And I want to make the tree trunk in my point mode. I want to move it down a bit, so it's a bit longer. Now, they're all a bit regular. So what we do is, while we have the cloner selected, we can go MoGraph, Effector, and Random. And by default, Random affects the position, which is good, but not really what I want. So let's go move that all to 0. I only wanted to affect the position a little bit, and only in the X and Z space. I don't want to move them up and down, because that does that. So, and then let's go scale, and let's affect the Y scale. There we go, and now we have a bunch of irregular trees. It's also a good idea to add rotation, and just a little bit, it'll rotate them that way, then a bit, it'll rotate them, it'll tilt them a bit, just to add maybe like 1 or 2 degrees, 3 degrees, you know. Nothing big, just add some variation to your little forest line. So there we have it. We have a lovely little forest line. So let's go, I'll select both of these, press Alt G, and call this forest line. Forest line. Let's call this front forest actually. Front forest. And now for the background forests. The front one, I like to have it 3D, but since we're kind of going for this theater set thing, let's control click and drag this group. And let's get our cloner tree. And let's just scale it, let's flatten it down like this. And now we have a bit of, you know, we can also scale the size down because you want to, you know, fake the distance effect. So let's scale the trees down a bit. And let's use the cloner, let's bring them closer together. So let's reduce the distance to like 101 and increase the number of them to, there you go. So they fill up the whole path. Also, I think this green plane, let's go out, model tool, select it, Alt T, and let's drag it out a bit. There you go. Also, something you'll notice that when you look at things further back, usually there's like a mist or something. So it's a good idea. Let's control click and drag this tree fur and call it tree fur 2. And let's make it a bit more blue, and let's just fade it out a bit and apply this material, replace this material. So now the back ones are a bit bluer. And the last step is just make another one of them. Once again, control click and drag it. Maybe offset it a bit. And right now they kind of look like a shadow, which is not really what we want. So what we do is we get this random deformer, attributes, and in the effector panel here, we just change the seed. There we go. Now we have a different random effect on the. We can also bring them closer together again. We can go to our cloner object, and we can reduce this distance a bit more. So there's more of them in the background there. And just offset them. And there we have it. We have our little fake kind of forest thing going on in the background. We can also scale this back, you know, the second back trees. We can scale them down a bit more so they're even smaller. There you go. We have a kind of fake depth in, you know, in 3 layers. And that works really nice when when you move past, when the camera pans past, you can see like depth, and it's a nice effect to have in all your scenes. Like parallax, people love looking at parallax. That's why I have all these popular websites now using parallax. So now that we have these basics, let's add just a little bit of sun. Let's go to our lights panel and infinite sun. As you can see, my sun looks a bit different because, again, I have these default settings that don't work for sun. So my fall off should be set to none, which yours already is. And in the general tab, turn the shadow maps to hard. And now we can use the rotate tool to rotate the sun around, like so. Let's get a good view of our. Let's move this sun out, and let's just make a small window and hit render quickly. Okay, so we have the shadows going. Now let's make another light, just a regular light object. Once again, this fall off should be none, but yours should be already there. And in general, now type in, press select ambient illumination, and once again, no shadows. And now you can just scale this down to like, I don't know, 40%. And if we hit render, see, we don't have those ugly blacks that were in the shadows. And let's just quickly add a little sky. Where's our sky? Oh, no, background. Yeah, background is easier. Background object, materials, double click. Let's select our color and select gradient. Click on the gradient icon. Change it to vertical because we want to be going down. Click and drag this thing to get rid of it. Click and tap two white things. And now we want this white. Click the little black arrow here. We want this white to be just a little bit blue. There you go. And now let's drag this material onto the background. Let's call this material sky. And now if we hit render, we have a nice little scene with a little sky and a little catapult. And, you know, if you want, you can always go to Control B to your render settings and go effects and turn on ambient occlusion and change this black to maybe like a gray and hit render. And you'll get some nice kind of shadowing as well. I would like to tweak the colors a bit. I don't like the tree green. It's really not pleasant for me. So let's tweak the tree green a bit. No, it's not the tree green. Where is it? Is it? Materials. Yeah, it's the grass. Tree fir 1. Let's change it slightly to maybe a more, maybe less saturated and a bit more blue. Let's hit render now. That looks much better. One thing. You'll notice the trees right now, they kind of look smooth. What we need to do is we need to select all our, we need to find all our trees here. Front forest, I forgot to do this at the beginning. Select all our trees. And we want to delete all these Phong tabs. You press the top one and press the shift key, the bottom one, and you press delete. And the same thing here, shift, click, delete. And where's our last tree? Oh, really? Oh yeah, here, this one, yeah. Shift, click, delete. And now when we hit render, see, now we have those nice kind of low poly lines. So it looks like it's made of cardboard or paper or something. I think the tree trunks are too dark, so let's bring these guys' brightness up a bit so we can see that there's some tree trunks there. It's a bit nicer. Anyway, so there we go. We have our catapult ready. We have our trees in the background. Maybe the grass is a bit too toxic right now, so let's just kill its saturation off a bit. Could be a bit darker. Let's hit render. And there we have it. We have the beginnings of our little catapult scene.